What if everything we believed about Paris Jackson was right? After years of silence, mystery, and media noise, she's finally come forward and confirmed what we all suspected. From the pain of growing up under the world's spotlight to the quiet truths about her father, Michael Jackson, Paris is telling her story, her way. And what she reveals will change how you see everything. This isn't just another celebrity tale. It's a raw, emotional journey through fame, grief, and survival. Stay with us, because by the end of this video, you'll understand why Paris Jackson's truth hits so deeply. Growing up as Michael Jackson's daughter. Before Paris Jackson ever spoke a word to the press, the world had already decided who she was. From the moment she could walk, cameras were chasing her. Only they never really saw her. Instead, they caught glimpses. A child in pajamas, face hidden behind a veil or mask, held tightly by a man the world called a king. Michael Jackson's efforts to shield his children from the spotlight often raised eyebrows. People mocked the masks, questioned the secrecy, and called it eccentric. But now, years later, Paris has confirmed what so many suspected, that it wasn't about hiding, it was about protecting. "He was just trying to give us a chance at being kids," she once said. "He didn't want us to be judged before we could even form our own identities." Imagine growing up with millions of eyes waiting to judge you, waiting to see if you could live up to a last name that had already changed the world. Michael knew that kind of pressure. He knew what fame could do to a child. So he built a world where, for a little while, Paris could just be a daughter, not a Jackson. But the masks didn't stop the fascination. If anything, they made people want more. Who were these hidden children of pop royalty? What did they look like? What kind of life did they live behind the gates of Neverland? For Paris, the answer wasn't fame or fortune. It was bedtime stories, blanket forts, and a father who made pancakes on Sunday mornings. Her early life was surreal, yes, but it was also filled with love. Still, nothing could keep the world out forever. As Paris puts it, people wanted us to be these perfect little symbols, but we were just kids. And one day, the world would see her without the veil. And when the masks finally came off, the world saw more than just Michael Jackson's daughter. They saw a girl stepping into the light, ready to speak her truth. A daughter's perspective. To billions, he was a genius. To her, he was just Dad. Paris Jackson never grew up watching her father moonwalk on stage. She didn't think of him as the man who sold out stadiums. Instead, her memories are filled with small, quiet moments. Movie nights under a blanket, late-night drives to get fast food, water balloon fights in the backyard. The world saw a superstar. She saw a soft-spoken man who just wanted to be a good parent. "He was the most loving person," she said in an interview. "He was goofy. He was just Dad." This contrast between the legend and the man is what shaped Paris's understanding of love and fame. Michael Jackson might have been the most famous person alive, but inside their home, there were no entourages, no paparazzi, no pressure. Just warmth. He taught her to say please and thank you, no matter who you were talking to. He made her do chores, gave her lessons about the world, and reminded her constantly to be kind. He told me, "Never believe the hype. You are no better than anyone else." That stuck with me, Paris shared. It's easy to forget that behind every celebrity is a person, and behind every myth, a human story. For Paris, Michael wasn't an untouchable icon. He was someone who tucked her in at night, someone who danced around the kitchen, someone who told her stories when she couldn't sleep. But even as he tried to build a bubble of normalcy, reality was waiting just outside. And when that bubble burst, on one summer day in 2009, it wasn't just a star the world lost. It was a father, a protector, and the heart of a family. I've always been more than someone's daughter. After Michael died, Paris didn't just lose her dad. She lost her shield. Suddenly, the quiet life he had built for her was gone, and in its place came headlines, judgment, and people trying to decide who she was, who she should be, and whether she deserved the Jackson name at all. But Paris wasn't going to stay silent. Over the years, she's made one thing clear. I've always been more than someone's daughter. She's faced critics who said she was only famous because of her last name. People who questioned her talent, her looks, even her identity. But instead of crumbling under the pressure, she carved out her own space. She became a model, an actress, a musician. She told her story in her own voice, raw, unfiltered, and unapologetically real. "I know who I am," she once said. "I don't need to prove it to anyone." Her music isn't polished pop. It's rough, emotional, and honest. A world away from the stadium anthems of her father, but just as powerful in its vulnerability. And in doing that, Paris reclaimed her story from the tabloids. She stopped being Michael Jackson's daughter and started being Paris, an artist in her own right. But even as she stepped into her own light, one thing remained close to her heart, an object she's carried for years, wrapped around her wrist, pulsing with memory. The bracelet that carried his scent. When Michael Jackson passed away, he was wearing a bracelet, an African rope with a jade stone woven through it. After his death, that bracelet found a new home, on the wrist of his daughter. Paris has worn it ever since, not for fashion, not for show, but because it carries a piece of him. "I could still smell him on it," she said softly. "It was like he never left." That bracelet became more than jewelry. It became a lifeline. The texture, the weight, the scent. It was her way of holding on when the world was falling apart. To outsiders, it might seem like a small thing. But anyone who's lost someone knows that grief clings to the tiniest fragments. A shirt, a voicemail, a smell. For Paris, that bracelet was her anchor. "It's a reminder," she once said, "that I was loved." Years have passed, but she's never taken it off. Not even once. It's her private rebellion against forgetting. Her quiet way of saying, he mattered, and so did what they had. But nothing could prepare her for the moment when the music stopped, and the world began to mourn someone she knew in a way no one else could. June 25th, 2009. June 25th, 2009. The day the world stood still. To millions, it was the day Michael Jackson died. To Paris, it was the day her world shattered. She was just 11 when she lost her father. And while fans gathered outside hospitals and media scrambled for headlines, a little girl sat in silence, trying to understand how someone so larger than life could just be gone. At the public memorial, she spoke just 13 words, but they were words that pierced the world's heart. "Daddy has been the best father you could ever imagine." That single moment broke through the noise. It reminded everyone that behind the spectacle, behind the controversy, there was a man who loved deeply and a daughter who loved him back. In the weeks that followed, the media frenzy was unbearable. Rumors, lawsuits, family battles. It was chaos. But through it all, Paris held on. To her bracelet, to her memories, to his voice in her head telling her, "You're strong. You can do this." "I had to grow up overnight," she later said. "But I've carried him with me every step since." And as she stepped back into the spotlight in the years that followed, Paris began telling her story. Not the story others wrote for her, but the one she lived. A childhood shaped by shadows and spotlights. A childhood of shadows and spotlights. From the outside, it looked like magic. Mansions, private zoos, amusement parks, and a father adored by the planet. But Paris Jackson's childhood was not a fairy tale. It was more like a glass house, where every crack was examined and every move was watched. Even before she could speak in full sentences, her life was a public obsession. The paparazzi followed her family like predators. Strangers tried to climb the gates of Neverland just to catch a glimpse. Paris wasn't just born into fame, she was born into curiosity she never asked for. Her father saw it coming. That's why he wrapped scarves around their faces. That's why he kept them hidden behind tinted SUV windows. At the time, people called it weird, but now, Paris understands it was survival. He was just trying to protect us from a world that didn't see us as kids, she explained. They saw us as headlines. For years, she hated the secrecy. She wanted to go to the mall like other kids. She wanted to walk through a park without security guards flanking her on both sides. But when she got older, she realized something painful. Her dad was right. The moment the masks came off, the world got loud and cruel. "I used to think I was missing out," she said. "But I get it now. He was just trying to let us be children." In that strange push and pull between privilege and protection, Paris learned a hard truth. Some people aren't born into a normal life. They're born into a story already being written. And that story doesn't always have room for who they really are. And in the years that followed, as the cameras kept clicking and the critics kept talking, Paris reached her breaking point, one that nearly cost her everything: mental health and the fight for inner peace. Fame doesn't come with a manual, neither does grief. And Paris Jackson found herself drowning in both. As she entered her teens, the weight became too much. The loss of her father, the expectations of the world, the pressure to live up to a name that felt more like a crown of thorns than a blessing. It all started to spiral. There were hospital visits, dark thoughts, a silence she didn't know how to break. "I didn't think I'd make it," Paris once admitted. "There were days I didn't want to be here." She was only a teenager, but her pain was already public. Tabloids ran cruel stories. Online trolls dissected her appearance, her choices, her music. People treated her like a headline instead of a human. But then, something changed. She started speaking out. Slowly, quietly, she began using her voice not to defend herself, but to help others. "Therapy saved me," she said. "Music saved me. Talking about it saved me." She became a voice for young people struggling in silence. Her message was simple but powerful. Healing isn't pretty. It isn't quick. And it definitely isn't linear. She opened up about her battles with depression, with self-worth, with identity, not for attention, but for connection, to remind others they weren't alone. "Some days, I still struggle," she confessed. "But I've learned that surviving is its own kind of success." And through that survival, through every scar and setback, Paris found new ways to tell her story, not just in words, but in something more permanent. Tattoos as testimony, etched in ink, etched in soul. Every tattoo on Paris Jackson's body tells a story. Not the kind written in books, but the kind written in pain, love, memory, and survival. On her left wrist is her father's handwriting, Queen of my heart. It's from a note he wrote her when she was little. Now, it's permanent. A piece of him she'll carry forever. Then there are the eyes from the Dangerous album. Michael's gaze, fierce and mysterious, inked across her arm like a guardian watching over her. She has the Bad logo too, but it's more than a tribute. It's a quiet rebellion. A way to reclaim a legacy that has been twisted, judged, and misunderstood. "These tattoos are my diary," she once said. "They're where I've been, who I've loved, what I've lost." Each piece of ink is a timestamp, a moment in time frozen on skin. Some represent grief. Others are survival marks from darker chapters. Some are just for joy. In a world where she's constantly being edited by others, cropped, quoted, filtered, her tattoos are a space she controls. A space where truth lives, no matter what the world says. "I got this one after my first breakdown," she said, pointing to a tiny crescent moon behind her ear. "I needed a reminder that I made it through the night." Ink became her therapy, her armor, her autobiography. But even beyond the pain and the art, what shaped her most weren't the crowds or the cameras. It was the quiet lessons her father left behind. The legacy of lessons, what Michael taught her. To the public, Michael Jackson was a genius. To his daughter, he was a teacher. Paris didn't learn about life from school or fame. She learned it from late-night talks in the backyard, from trips to the grocery store where no one knew who they were, from quiet stories about growing up in Gary, Indiana, where money was tight, but love was everything. "He wanted us to see how real people lived," Paris recalled. "He'd take us to toy stores and say, 'You only get one thing, be grateful.' He taught her to look people in the eye, to say thank you to waiters, to give without expecting anything back. These weren't lessons from a superstar. They were lessons from a man who remembered what it was like to have nothing. He told me, no matter how famous you are no better than anyone else." He wanted her to be kind, to be curious, to be strong. And more than anything, he wanted her to feel, to use her heart as much as her head. That's why she connects so deeply to music, to art, to people. That's why, no matter how painful the world gets, she keeps trying to make it better. Those values didn't fade when Michael passed. They grew inside Paris. And when the noise got too loud, when the grief felt like a scream, Paris turned to the one place that always brought her peace: music. Music as medicine, the inheritance of sound. Paris didn't choose music because of her last name. She chose it because it helped her breathe. She doesn't chase radio hits or pop stardom. Her sound is raw, stripped down, acoustic. The kind of music that bleeds. "It's the only thing that makes me feel okay," she said. "It's how I talk to him. It's how I talk to myself." Her debut album didn't top charts, but that wasn't the point. It was honest. It was hers. A journal in melodies. A letter to her father. A lifeline for anyone who's ever felt lost. Sometimes you can hear his influence in the way she holds a note, in the way she pours herself into the lyrics. But she never tries to imitate him. She honors him by being real. And in those moments, when she's on stage, barefoot, eyes closed, you can feel it. That inheritance of sound, not in the beat, but in the bravery. Music was always around us, she said, but it wasn't about being perfect. It was about feeling something. Now she uses it to heal, to tell her truth, to create space for others to do the same. But even as she found her voice, the world still had questions about her background, her identity, and where she truly belonged. Identity under the microscope. As Paris Jackson grew older, the questions got louder. Not just about her father's legacy, but about who she was, where she belonged, what she had the right to claim. Some people questioned her race. Others questioned her roots. There were headlines that picked apart her skin tone, her features, her hair, and always the same undertone. Does she really count as a Jackson? Paris never asked to be a symbol, but that didn't stop people from making her one. And when she began identifying as a biracial woman, the backlash was swift. Most people don't understand what it means to grow up with a black father and a white mother, she said. They want to put you in a box. But I'm not a box. Michael Jackson raised his children with pride in their heritage. He taught them about Black history, about injustice, about strength. He made sure they understood where they came from, even if the world tried to erase it. He told me, "You're Black, be proud of that." And I am, Paris shared in an interview. But identity is more than appearance. It's how you were raised, what you were taught, who shaped you, and Paris refuses to let anyone rewrite that for her. She doesn't scream to be accepted. She doesn't argue online. She simply lives in her truth, quietly and consistently. "I'm not here to convince anyone," she said. "I'm just here to be me." And for someone so often defined by the outside world, the real breakthrough came when she turned inward, using creativity not for attention, but for healing. Healing through art, not headlines. For Paris Jackson, healing didn't happen in hospitals or interviews. It happened in creativity, in music, in acting, in fashion, in art that wasn't about fame, but about finding herself. Her journey into Hollywood wasn't about chasing cameras. It was about expression. Roles that let her explore pain and joy. Photo shoots that let her celebrate the body she once felt trapped in. Songs that let her cry without having to explain why. "I'm not trying to be famous," she once said. "I'm just trying to feel okay." In a world obsessed with filters and perfection, Paris did the opposite. She showed the cracks, the healing, the hurt. She let people see her process, not just the polished product. She starred in indie films, modeled for high-fashion brands, released music that sounds more like therapy than performance. Every move she makes is one step further from the girl the media tried to define. "I've learned to create for myself," she said. "Not for applause, not for approval, just for peace." Art became her way out, her way through, her way of answering a world that keeps asking her who she is. But with every spotlight she steps into, there's still a weight on her shoulders, one that comes from the name she carries, a name that gave her everything and took just as much. The painful privilege of being a Jackson. Being born a Jackson means inheriting history, not just the kind that fills music halls and stadiums, but the kind that never lets you forget who you are, or who people expect you to be. It means growing up in a house where gold records line the walls, but so do shadows. For Paris Jackson, life was never ordinary. Her childhood was wrapped in velvet and watched through lenses. She ate breakfast with bodyguards nearby. Her playdates were interrupted by helicopters circling overhead. Her family name opened doors, but it also painted targets on their backs. "I had a roof over my head," she said, "but I also had people trying to break into my house." She didn't mean it as a metaphor. It really happened. That's the twisted nature of celebrity. The higher you're placed, the more people want to touch, take, or tear you down. Fame gave her access to everything: a global stage, elite circles, the power to create. But it also built a cage, one made of assumptions and expectations. Everywhere she went, she wasn't just Paris. She was Michael Jackson's daughter. That legacy could open any door, sure. But it also meant every move she made was watched, recorded, and judged. There were days she wanted to embrace it. Other days, she wanted to disappear entirely. "Sometimes I just wish I could be a barista," she confessed once, laughing, but not really joking. Just live without being watched. Michael had warned her. He told her fame could turn, that the same crowd that cheers for you on stage could tear you apart in the tabloids the next day. He lived it. He survived it, for a while. But it left scars, ones Paris saw before she could understand them. Now she sees it clearly. The love, the obsession, the betrayal, the way fame elevates and then devours. She's lived it too. And instead of chasing that cycle, Paris has made a quiet decision. She won't play the same game. She's learned to say no, to walk away from things that don't feel real, to protect her peace over her profile. Her goal isn't to be the most famous Jackson, it's to be the most whole version of herself. That kind of strength doesn't come easy. It's been forged in public mistakes, private breakdowns, and slow healing. It's cost her relationships, opportunities, and years of silence. But it's also given her clarity. "I'm not trying to live up to anyone," she said. "I'm just trying to live." Fame may be a throne, but it's not always worth sitting on. And Paris, more than anyone, knows what it costs to wear a crown made of her father's legacy. And part of that survival, part of finally breathing again, meant stepping away from the dream her father once built. A fantasy world crafted from magic and love that eventually crumbled under its own weight. From Neverland to now. The death of fantasy. Neverland was supposed to be a paradise, a place where childhood never ended. But for Paris Jackson, it became something else entirely. As a little girl, she loved the rides, the animals, the magic. Her father built it as a sanctuary from the world. But after his death, the fantasy collapsed. "I can't go back there," she said quietly. "It doesn't feel like it used to." The home that once felt like a wonderland became a ghost town. The laughter was gone. The music had stopped. And for Paris, it was a painful reminder that nothing, no matter how magical, can last forever. She began to see Neverland not just as a place, but as a symbol of how fame distorts reality, of how innocence can be stolen, of how even the most beautiful dreams can break. Her reflections on that chapter are clear-eyed, not bitter. "It was beautiful while it lasted," she admitted. "But it wasn't real. Not really." Now, she lives simply, quietly. No theme parks, no press tours, just space to breathe. Because the real escape wasn't found in fantasy, it was found in truth. And in the end, through all the pain and transformation, Paris gave the world something that doesn't need decoding. A truth that speaks louder than all the noise. A confirmation of what we always knew. The confirmation, what we always knew. Paris Jackson didn't have to say it out loud, but she did. And when she finally did, it hit like a soft thunder. She confirmed that behind the myths and the madness, Michael Jackson was a father who tried, a man who gave everything he had, not just to the stage, but to his children. He was the best father you could ever imagine, she told the world, and those words have never left us. She confirmed that she is not just a shadow of his fame. She's her own person, flawed, beautiful, still healing, still growing. She confirmed that grief doesn't disappear. It becomes part of you. That art can be a lifeline. That love can last beyond death. And maybe most of all, she confirmed that the Jackson legacy isn't just music or moonwalks or fame. It's resilience. It's survival. It's truth. "I'm still figuring it out," she said recently. "But I know I'm not just somebody's daughter. I'm me." The story of Paris Jackson isn't neat or easy. It's not a fairy tale, but it's real. It's human. It's a reminder that even in the spotlight's harshest glare, people can still find their way home. And in the silence that followed the final song, in the echo left by a legend, we finally heard the truth we always suspected. Michael Jackson may have been the king of pop, but to Paris, he was just Dad. And that, more than anything, is what matters most.